like
It says meeting is now streaming live.
When you usually do it, do you see on that internet
I've only
page?
done it once, and somehow I wasn't sure if it was even recording.
Yeah.
And then hmm. All right. So I'm going to assume that this is recording on the Conscious Awakening Network, in which case this is episode 3 of Age of Gaia with Kiara Windrider. And joining me today will be David and Shannon, friends of mine in Rhode Island. And they should be, if this works, joining me in a couple of minutes. I'm still trying to work out some glitches here. I'm very new to the system. And every time I do this, I'm still very new to this. So hopefully one of these days it will become second nature. So I still don't see them joining me here. So maybe the links have changed. So the backup plan, since this is not working, is that David and Shannon are going to join me right here on the couch, since I'm staying with them at the moment. So here's David, David Trotterman, and here's Shannon Foley.
Hi.
So, all right, so I'm assuming that this is recording. So there's the record button. Oh my God.
You're recording.
I'm recording.
Oh, yeah, it says
Oh yeah, this is okay.
yeah.
Okay, this is the Age of Gaia, episode 3. And here we are, live.
You gotta laugh in these times.
I mean, I'm such a dinosaur. I think these two over here are much more adept at these things. So our theme today, since we're trying to do this live, is to talk about what the Age of Gaia represents for us. So David was suggesting maybe like a State of the Union address for this episode of Gaia. And So let me ask you, David, how would you perceive this particular time in history? Where are we today? What's the potentials for where we're going as a planetary consciousness? And what options lie before us?
Yeah, I think we have infinite possibility right now. And it seems like we're living in a time that is really magnified, that there's an incredible influx of energy, which we can either use to transform ourselves, or we can use to become more entrenched in selfish ways, self-serving ways. And I think that's what we're all experiencing is what are we going to do with this tremendous influx of energy? And I see people on both sides of that aisle and all throughout the spectrum. Some people through these very challenging times are transforming themselves and expanding their capacity to be present, to be conscious, to be kind, embracing others. And I see others that are using that energy for power and control. So I think that's what's facing all of us right now is the reality that there is a huge wave of energy coming into our lives. And we're being faced with that very important decision. How are we going to use it?
Well said. What about you, Shannon? How would you respond?
Yeah. And I think those waves will continue, right? I mean, from the research that you do with these galactic waves that keep coming to the planet, frequencies of light that we can use for our upliftment if we choose. You know, we're seeing the polarity on the planet. We have the choice.
One thing we talked about is we can approach this from so many different angles. So we can look at it as a collective journey. We can look at it in terms of how we personally are confronting these times. And it's they're related, but it's also a different question. So let's talk about that a little bit. Like, how do we personally walk through these times with a sense of purpose, with a sense of grace and ease, knowing that it's not so easy on many levels. So what would you say, David?
Well, I think, like Chiara was speaking the other night with a group, and he was normalizing some of the symptoms of awakening, which sometimes we think that we're doing something wrong or we're inadequate or we're going crazy in some way. And because there's not really a clear roadmap that's being offered in any sort of public narrative about what it feels like to awaken. And so I think a lot of symptoms of that influx of energy are getting mistakenly identified with more reasons for why we're not good enough, all of the small self kind of talk that we can get into. And so I think normalizing some of those symptoms, just like when you go through a healing journey, there's always going to be symptoms of detox, of releasing old patterns, old thoughts, feelings, emotions. So I found that very helpful. And some of those can be, just feeling like your sense of identity is changing, how you relate to yourself, what's meaningful, your value systems. It's, it could be physical symptoms of feeling extra fatigue or feeling a little foggy. And so I enjoyed, Chiara, that you expanded our understanding that that this is part of the journey of awakening. It's an important part.
Yeah, and I think that's where personal discernment comes in place, because sometimes it's like, do I need a nap or do I need to take a walk? And so sometimes it's like, what does the body need? And so to know your own intuition, to tune into your own self and see in any given moment, sometimes do I need to raise my energy or do I need to conserve a little bit, and only we know individually ourselves what we need. So I think that's
Mm. So maybe this is a good time for you both to share a little bit about who you are, what you do, um, in terms of your passion, in terms of your profession, so we can make it a bit more personal.
Well, I can start. Yeah, sure.
Mhm.
So, I think like many of us, there's usually some catalyst in our life that propels us to seek a paradigm that can explain who we are, what we're going through. We all reach that point where our inner narrative, our inner understanding of who we are, doesn't doesn't explain what's happening to us and what we're supposed to be doing. And so I had one of those moments in my own life, and I think we have them, quite frequently if we're seeking truth, if we're seeking to expand our understanding of who we are, where my paradigm didn't, it couldn't answer all the questions that I had. And, whether it's a book or it's a particular lecturer or speaker, some awakening energy usually comes into your life that helps you to take the next step on that journey to understand more about yourself. And for me, it was the Autobiography of a Yogi, and being connected with Paramahansa Yoganandaji, who's a great spiritual teacher. And many millions of people have read that book. And that expanded my worldview enough that I could start to answer some of those questions. And for me, the questions were just, they were um, an inner sense that there was something more. There was something more than what I was living. There was more potential. There was a bigger story. So that was probably the most significant step in my life, was to encounter a great yogi who had expanded his consciousness and who had aligned with truth in a really meaningful and real way. And from there, it's been a progressive journey of trying to tune my own consciousness to the highest expression that I can, um, and to live dharmically, day by day and moment to moment, expanding my little sense of self into a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger. Yeah, I think that's a good place to start.
Well, the Autobiography of a Yogi was such a pivotal book for me as well. And I think for a lot of people. Shannon, you too.
yes.
So it's like, I don't know, for those who don't know about this, it's one of the classics of spiritual literature. It's the story of Yogananda Paramahamsa and his journeys through the Himalayas, meeting various masters along the way, eventually finding his own teacher, Babaji. Babaji Mahavatar, as he's sometimes known. And Babaji is someone who has taken the rainbow body or the light body, someone who has immortalized his physical form, and completely available and committed to the awakening of our human species and of a level of planetary consciousness. And there's many masters along the way who've met him, who have had experiences with him. And Yogananda is one of these who was then inspired through his teachers and, along the way to go to America to set up the center. And this is where we all ultimately came together. There's centers in California initially, and right now, where David and Shannon are living in Rhode Island, this is the center that we're referring to. So maybe you want to say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, one of Yoganandaji's great reasons for being here on Earth was, as we were speaking about earlier, this need to have a roadmap or a way to understand who we are and what our purpose is while we're here on this earth. That's one of the great resources that Yoganandaji brought to this world, was a way to understand where we are in time and history. And Kiara speaks about this very eloquently, about the yugas, which are these grand cycles of time. Maybe as we talk about our collective journey, we could talk about the yugas a little bit. But he brought us a series of techniques and philosophies and understandings that help us to live in this present age, an age where a tremendous amount of energy is flowing. And these techniques and these particular philosophies are to help us to be in tune with a higher reality so that we can embrace that incoming energy and use it in a positive way, a constructive way that helps us to be more in tune with our own higher potential. Um, and it makes that process of awakening a lot more graceful when you have particular techniques that do put you in tune. And there are many. Yoga is a wonderful expression of that. There are so many different paths, but one thing that all true paths have in common is that they put us in tune with reality, and that helps us to. And so we attend a particular center called Ananda, which is a part of the tradition of Yogananda's teachings, and there are Ananda centers all over the world. And they share these teachings of Kriya Yoga and energization exercises and all different philosophies, chanting. These are all ways that we can raise our consciousness so that we can gracefully embrace new energies.
Some people may be familiar with the concept of the yugas. Maybe David and Shannon, if you would like to share a little bit more about your own understanding of these yugas, where we are in this cycle at the moment, and what that means. What does it mean if you're in Kali Yuga, or Dvapara Yuga, or Treta Yuga, Sat Yuga? What does those energies mean? What are the potentials that we could be facing as we transition from one to the other?
Yeah, I can share a little bit. I think we're sort of just dropped into this world and this lifetime, and it's really helpful to know where we are in time and space. And the yugas are a system of progressive evolution of human consciousness and also progressive descension. It's a grand cycle starting from the most materialistic consciousness and rising all the way to the most enlightened consciousness that we can embrace. We happen to be living in a time right now where in 1900, we went into Dwapara Yuga proper, which means that we are fully out of the previous cycle which was very materialistic. I mean, if you look into the past, you can just see that the consciousness was focused primarily on the material world, what you could touch, what you could feel, what you could sense. And we're moving into an age, or we just moved into an age fully, which is Dwapara Yuga, the age of energy. And so, words like energy, vibration, frequency, consciousness were completely alien, a few hundred years ago to the average person's mind. And now we hear them in all walks of life. And it's because people are attuning to this new age. They're becoming more receptive to the reality that our consciousness is an energetic expression. So, we're just in the beginning of it. Yoganandaji said that this is a very tumultuous age because we are transitioning from a very materialistic consciousness to a whole entire new expression of consciousness. That's where a lot of the upheaval comes in. Essentially, you have these polarities of awareness. Some people are hugging towards that materialistic view, and other people are, running down this new pathway of energy, vibration, frequency, consciousness. So that's just a little snippet to sort of understand where we are, and you can see it in your outer world. I mean, the use of electricity, the internet, the exchange of information, And one of the hallmarks of Dwapara Yuga is that Yoganandaji said that space will be annihilated in this, or the illusion of space will be annihilated in this yuga. And what that means is that we'll understand that there is no distance of space. And you see that with imagine what it was like to travel a few hundred years ago. It would take months to travel from continent to continent. Now we do it in a few hours. And at the end of this yuga, I think we'll see that people will be able to travel very quickly. You see that with the internet. Information is traveling in the blink of an eye. And here we are online, or
Right.
we're talking online.
And there's positive and negative aspects to this. So, for instance, the internet, when people talk about artificial intelligence, the information age, it brings us closer to each other. It provides more opportunities for evolution, for positive connection, but it can also bring us closer to the edge of destruction. The age of energy is also the age of the atom. And as we know, we've been so close to the edge of nuclear destruction in the last 100 years or so. So the choices we're given in Dwapara Yuga are much greater. And that requires wisdom. How do we use those choices? How do we align with something greater than ourselves? Now, Shannon's a therapist. How would you contribute to this conversation from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so important for us to understand about energy and our own energy and our personal energy, and knowing that we can shift our state of mood, our consciousness. It's not just we have learned to take a pill or something, that we can learn to do that our own self. And like David said, some of the practices, energization, yoga postures, meditation, all these are tools that we can use. And so that's something that I like to help people with, is learning to work with their own energy.
One question that comes up for me and for many people is, where do you find hope in the midst of all this? Especially when there's chaos around, when you're going through a dark night, when you feel hopeless about the state of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all been there. And, that's where I think faith helps, having faith in something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah, and I think, growing your inner reality is what really helps in those moments. Is if our sense of self is so dependent on what's happening in our outer world, inevitably the outer world is always going to change. It's never going to be secure or stable in a way that you can always feel content in yourself. Contentment doesn't come from outer security. It comes from developing an inner reality. And I think that's what Shannon's alluding to with faith, is to grow that inner reality. And whether it's meditation or it's Qigong or it's yoga asana practices, whatever helps you to grow that sense of inner reality, that's what helps, I think, to bring back a sense of hope. Because inevitably, as your own sense of self deepens and you start to ask those really important questions of who am I, and is there something more than just my body? Is there something more than just my day-to-day responsibilities, my relationships with family and friends? Is there something deeper here? As that reality grows, I think we start to tune into the real reality, which is beyond just this physical dreamlike world that we're watching change before our eyes, and we touch a greater reality within ourselves. And that always makes me feel hopeful, because that reality, the fabric of it is joy. It's ever new joy, ever new bliss. And the times that I'm feeling really discouraged, I know that that's an invitation for me to dive a little bit deeper into my own personal practice, either meditation or, and it's, you know, it's very unique. Everyone's path is very unique. But I feel as long as you're receptive and you're willing to embrace something new, then you'll be led to that next step, and you'll be led to that next person, or the proper path for you to follow, or the right teacher, the right video. But growing that inner reality is the most, I think, important.
And I think that's where sometimes it's like, you know, we have to take action. We have to move out of our comfort zone sometimes, or if we're feeling, you know, in a lower state, it's almost like we have to push ourselves sometimes. And because when we are, you know, in a flow, then that's where the synchronicities are. And like you said, the right video or the right person, but we have to also have action with that too.
And one thing I also find useful is expanding your perceptions and your perspectives. So if I'm stuck in a certain way of seeing the world, and it's you know, fairly narrow version of reality, then I'm going to feel like a victim. I'm going to feel like my choices are limited. I'm going to feel separate from the world around me. And as soon as I expand my perceptions, something changes. Then I'm seeing myself from, it's like an eagle's eye view looking down. Looking at the big picture in space and time. And then new options open up, new possibilities, new awarenesses that I wouldn't have seen before. And in this case, you know, as we look at the perceptions of this perspective of the yugas, from the perspective of where we're going. So right now we're in Dwapara Yuga, heading towards Treta Yuga, then towards the Sat Yuga, which is also what people refer to as the Golden Age. What is the potential of who we are as humans on that level of consciousness? And then seeing ourselves in a developmental stage, moving towards that. So we can't expect that we're going to be adults overnight. We start off coming into birth, starting off in childhood, moving slowly up towards maturity. And in Dwapara Yuga, we're still in a relatively young stage. We still haven't really mastered energy. We haven't mastered our awareness and unification of the different aspects of ourselves. And what if we do? What if we start moving towards the fullness of our potential? And I think that perspective helps me also. It's like we are waking up. We are recognizing that we are part of a much bigger reality than what we know at this time. And it includes the planetary consciousness, not just human and not just individual perceptions.
And I think the beauty of this age is that you can experience these expanded perspectives. It doesn't have to just be a suspension of belief, or taking somebody's word for it, but there are techniques and practices and ways of living where you can actually have an experience of a higher state of awareness. And that's, I think, what's most important, is that we actually we were just listening to a wonderful service today, and that we experiment. We experiment and go within, explore that beautiful universe within ourselves to see what it's like. Maybe there is something more than we thought before. Maybe there is more potential. Maybe where we're scared or we're concerned, that there is something beyond that precipice. And I think that's where life can become a really beautiful journey, and it can become an adventure. It can become so meaningful when we just take a little bit of a risk to be uncomfortable or walk out into the unknown and embrace something that is uncomfortable. I mean, that I feel like that's where life happens. It's right on that precipice.
Like Joseph Campbell said, follow your bliss, right?
Yeah. And that state of discomfort, that can be such a rich place to discover something about yourself. We tend to gravitate to things that are comfortable and safe, but the adventure lies beyond that. And so does the adventure of consciousness. And as we step into the unknown, to the mystery, into the insecurity, going beyond our boundaries and our borders, that's when we sometimes find the deepest gift. And that's not just something that we are learning to experience on a personal level, but as a species. I think that's the power of this particular time, that we have brought ourselves almost to the edge of extinction as a species. But then from that, we're also discovering more about who we truly are. Things that we've forgotten, things that are laying dormant within our DNA. And so what does it mean to remember? And that's part of what we're learning about as a species today.
Yeah, it feels almost like we've been in this collective amnesia, and now there's just more access to that reality of who we truly are. And it's such beautiful, exciting, sometimes very painful or disorienting time, but there's just so much possibility. And it feels like that reality is just pouring into our present day, and we can embrace it. We really can embrace it. And also that there are lots of other people who are walking that same path, and that we can have friends along the way, because it can be overwhelming on an individual level. But in a collective sense, there are whole communities out there that are full of souls who are dedicating themselves to this, to embracing this, a lifetime of awakening. And that can be very helpful too, to find that community and keep like-minded people around you, people that are uplifting and loving and supportive, who are also seeking something more for themselves, something more beautiful.
Wonderful. So Dave and Shannon, where can people find you? And how can people support you in your journeys?
Yeah, I would say, we're associated with Ananda quite a bit. And, Ananda is a really beautiful way to connect with souls that are, they're consciously trying to become a channel for light and goodness in this world. The hallmark qualities of people that I've met at Ananda are joy, kindness, and service. And I would say just to get involved to connect with a center or connect with a group of people, to connect with the Autobiography of a Yogi, or whatever way you can connect with the light. I mean, us personally, Shannon and I are serving in our little local community here as in the ways that we feel dharmically called to. Um, but there's so many communities and so many opportunities. So I would find whatever's closest to you, whatever you feel called to and gravitate towards, just move a little closer towards the light, and you'll find your tribe. You'll find the people that will help to support you on your journey.
Yeah, I think what you just said about Ananda, that's probably the best at this point.
Do you have a website? Or
We don't have a website right now. We will eventually. We had one, but we took it down, so we're
Yeah,
restructuring.
on Facebook, our name is Healing Within, and on Instagram, same thing. Healing Within is the tagline we've been using. So you can look that up if you'd like.
Oh, wonderful. So Dave and Shannon are some of my closest friends on this earth, and it's always a joy to come visit you guys and share these journeys together. And so let's keep moving forward, all of us, into this age of light. So thank you for joining us today. And any questions that you are working with in your own lives that you would like to offer, let's take those questions into consideration in the next show. So Kiara at eternaldoorway.com. That's my email. I also want to just make an announcement at this point. Yesterday, 4 of my books were published by Notion Press in India, and they're on Amazon India right now. And they should be on Amazon.com and Amazon.uk, along with some other platforms in the next few days. So that's it's Gaia Luminous, which is kind of an overview of what we're talking about, where we're going as a planetary consciousness. And then there's Homo Luminous, which is a manual for practical techniques to awaken. And then there's a series of novels. It's a trilogy. The first 2 are done. I'm working on the third now. And it's based on the story of Jesus and his travels in India, who he meets along the way, his marriage to a Kashmiri woman after his return from Palestine, after the crucifixion. So it's not necessarily the story that most of us are familiar with from the Christian tradition, but it's a teaching story, and it's a metaphor for these times. So look for that if you might be interested. So we send you blessings in your journeys, and peace and joy in all that you do in your journey of self-discovery. Blessings.
Blessings.